Hi, folks. This is Rick Doc Walker, the DOC.
This is John Kime, and you're listening to the Mess Hall with Rally Captain and Tailgate Ted.
What's going on, everybody? I want to welcome former Washington Redskins Center, Will Montgomery, to the DMV Mess Hall. Will played 10 years in the NFL. Drafted by the Panthers, played for the Jets, most importantly, the Redskins. Then he had a career with the Broncos and the Bears. So I used to do a show at Fox 5 where I would come in Sunday mornings, maybe 6:30 in the morning. And I think Will would get there maybe before me or just a little bit after, and would do a show called Redskins Game Time. So that's how I got to know Will. Really appreciate him joining Rally and I here on the Mess Hall. We wanted to have him on to, talk about the Washington Commanders offensive line. Will started 54 games at center, 10 games at right guard, and 7 games at left guard. And Will, I wanted to ask you, this offensive line for the Commanders.
Hold on, let me stop you right there. When we were doing the show on the Fox 5 pregame show, normally you were bringing me in like a nice slab of prime rib that had been sous vide overnight. There were some good appetizers. So right when we start our conversation, I'm already starting to salivate, and I'm just wondering where's like the rib. Even though we're doing this over Zoom, I mean, I just want to go and eat some prime rib or something right now.
If you come out to a tailgate, I guarantee I will give you the best meal that you've had in a long time. How about that?
Well, I think that we're planning on at least coming to the alumni game at a minimum. So we'll have to touch base before we get to that game.
That sounds good, man. It'll be good to see you out there. It's been some time. When I texted you earlier, I was bummed I missed you at training camp on the 15th when you came. I know that you got to see Chris Russell and a bunch of the other guys, but I ended up missing you out there that day.
Yeah, well, it's nice having Tim Hightower as the director of alumni relations, as I blocked for Tim. So now Tim is sending out the invites for some of these things. He gets the alumni out there. And some of these invites include golfing events. So it's nice to, kind of golf at Creighton Farms Country Club or, Army, Navy, or Trump, or some of the other nice golf courses in the area. And then also, we just had a charity event this past weekend, handing out back to school supplies for some of the needy children at FedEx Field. Also enjoy, handing out some turkeys around Thanksgiving time. So it's nice. I think Tim Hightower is doing a great job with the alumni as well.
Tim really is doing a great job with the alumni. To hear that they're bringing all these Washington legends back, to make sure that fans know that the Commanders is not a expansion team, that we have a rich history, and to tap into that history and getting all of you all out there, he's really done a good job to do that. And I saw that he did something at DC Prime earlier during, I think, OTAs, and had like a nice steak dinner with some of the older guys and the newer guys. And man, if those walls could talk, I can only imagine the stories that Doc Walker and some of you all were sharing with those guys.
Yeah, well, I didn't make that episode at DC Prime, but I did do a couple episodes of Check Please with Julie Dollinson and Logan Paulson over there. So that was, doing a couple of those. Whenever you want to like invite me out to eat red meat and talk football, that's right up my wheelhouse. And speaking of Logan Paulson, I know he's all over the media circuit as well. He's doing a little high school coaching with me also here locally at Independence. We also conducted a couple camps in the off season for the high school kids as well.
Well, next time you're doing one of those camps, you let me know, and I'm happy to bring out the rig that Kerrigan hooked me up with and cook up some food for the kids.
Well, you had me at ribs, so yeah. Next time we have a little thing going on, we're gonna get some food going too.
That sounds good, man. That sounds good. Well, I wanted to ask you about our offensive line. Current Commanders offensive line. Last season, Pro Football Focus ranked them 6th out of all the lines out there. But it's dramatically changed since then. We've lost All-Pro Brandon Sheriff. We've lost Eric Flowers, who's actually still on the market as a free agent. We now have, a couple of new guys in Trey Turner that are on the team, and Andrew Norwell, both of them who were drafted by the Panthers and played under Ron Rivera and Coach John Matsko. But my concern, and a lot of fans' concerns, is the fact that the starting or projected starting offensive line have yet to practice together during training camp and have yet to take a snap together all preseason. How difficult is it to get that rapport with your brothers when you're not getting a chance to really line up and be in the trenches?
Well, I like how you brought up the Pro Football Focus ranking there in the top 5 or 6. That reminds me of the 2012 season when Pro Football Focus had me ranked as the number 5 center in the NFL, although I don't remember being paid as the number 5 center in the NFL. So, all these rankings are good. At the end of the day, it comes down to the entire team execution, turnovers, penalties, everything else. I as well, I went back and watched a little bit of tape. I checked out the depth chart. I mentioned I haven't seen Leno out there at left tackle a ton. Leno and I actually played together on the same team in Chicago Bears. So in 2015, I played with Leno when he's the left tackle in the Bears when he was on his way up. Like you mentioned, both of your guards are out. Your center has been in and out as well a little bit, through the preseason. And it kind of reminds me, I think it was maybe the 2013 preseason when I was in there at center and we had Laribas and Adam Geddes in the entire preseason at guards because, Lichtensteiger was coming off a knee and Chester, who knows what he had going on, maybe a little hamstring or something. So I think that for the veteran guys, it's not as big of a deal. I think it's more of an issue for younger players. As you mentioned, these big guards have a history, with the head coach, with the Panthers, so they kind of understand what the head coach wants to do. They understand the schemes. They understand the O-line coach, Matzkow. So I'm not really concerned at all for the veterans. More reps are better, yes, but maybe with these younger guys or these second teamers getting more reps in preseason, that might be a blessing because there's only 3 preseason games. So the reps are getting cut anyways. And they have, can see those live bullets coming in action, and they are actually playing pretty well. I think. I'm seeing runs of 8-9 yards. I'm seeing I'm seeing protection fairly well. Occasionally, I think in the last game there may have been a sack in the second quarter, but I think that was more of a coverage sack. Really, the 3 or 4 seconds, and then your quarterback steps up to the left and takes a sack. That ball really should be out in about 2.8, 2.9, maybe 3 seconds. Much more than that, then kind of you put on the quarterback and on the coverage unit, not really the O-line. And also, when we talk about sacks and things of that nature, we want to make sure that quarterback is stepping up to 7 yards. I remember in the 2014 year when I played with the Broncos and a guy we know as Peyton Manning. I was fortunate enough to snap the ball to him for half a season, and he, in the gun, he might be at 5 or 6 yards. He would, take a couple steps back, a couple steps up, and he was always throwing the ball right at 7, 6.5, 7 yards. So let the tackles run the guys wide. Hopefully your centers and guards are stout, and he is throwing at that 7-yard mark. And I think that year in particular, we led the league in the least amount of sacks. I think we gave up 14 sacks that year, and it wasn't because of the O-line. It's because of the quarterback. That ball was out like a hot potato. We were missing guys right and left with various defensive line stunts and twists and everything else. So, yes, the O-line matters with sacks and protections and everything else, but the quarterback getting that ball out also, can help a lot.
I definitely agree. And Carson has said himself that he likes to hold on to the ball till the very, very last second. That sack he took during the Chiefs game actually knocked the Commanders out of field goal range. And it was kind of frustrating because the first team offense hasn't actually put up any points versus first team defense. And we were hoping to finally see that. But Chase Rouillet coming back from, I think it was a broken fibula. So he's a starting center, and Leno missed the game this past weekend. You actually had Schweitzer, who's been doing a great job. I think he's played a majority of his time at guard. He's got 56 starts at guard, but actually came in and played 1 game at center last year and has done a great job just because of all the different injuries that have come up. But from a communication perspective, you talk about passing off stunts and just different defensive alignments that you're going up against. How important is it to have that communication with, from a center to a guard perspective? I mean, Rouillet calls out blitz packages and where, the line's making a shift. Is that something that you did when you were on the offensive line back then?
Yeah, well, not because I'm partial or anything, but the center, as far as mentally, is definitely the most important piece on the offense. He's calling the protections. He's setting. You have 5 offensive linemen, so you can obviously block 5 guys. In the protections. So he's calling out the middle linebacker, or in some cases, the will linebacker, the weak linebacker, who you're going to pick up in protections. whether, it's a Ram or a Lion call, an R or an L kind of term to whoever you're blocking. Same thing in the run game. The center sort of sets the scheme for the offensive line, and then the tight ends and fullbacks and everybody else kind of goes off that point. So there's going to be some plays where the center and the offensive line, they're going to go to the first linebacker in the box and maybe give a tight end or back or somebody the second guy. And in some cases, they'll go to the third or the fourth guy. So depending on the protection, depending on the run scheme, the center sets everything. So your center has to be on it mentally. And it's kind of a game of cat and mouse, because a lot of these defenses also will line up in one thing and change to another thing last second. So you already have to anticipate any potential changes of the calls, not to mention offensively, you might change it into a call. So the defense is changing defenses. Offensively, you may have a run pass check or a run check, to get in the best play possible. So you have to not only see what the defense is changing into, you have to be in tune with what your quarterback is changing into. And then also, if there's any special cadence or anything like that that's going on, that also comes into play. So your center will definitely set the stage as far as mentally getting everybody in the right assignments. But, your guards and tackles are also big as well. I remember a former teammate of mine also, Evan Mathis, he played left guard for the Eagles for some time, a handful of years ago. And he loved to short set guys in pass protection. And when I say short set, almost simulate run for 2 or 3 steps and then sit right there and, start his protection from there. And that was fine and all, but Peters, the left tackle there, liked a vertical set. So they were never on the same page, because Mathis was like the set on the line. Peters like to set backwards off the ball. So over there, those are definitely two Pro Bowl players, but they were never quite synced up. And then they had a hard time passing off line stunts because they weren't on the same level even. So to that degree, you definitely need to be on the same page with your line mate, your line buddy. Make sure you're setting at the same level. And then the communication with the center, is the center sliding right? Is the center sliding left? If the center is sliding all the way to the nickel that's outside of the box, then okay, now that your tackle is allowed to overset, because the guard can now help the tackle, and then the center will probably take over the guard's guy. So there's a lot of communication that happens in that front box.
It sounds like it. It really does.
Yeah.
Rally, I know you had something you wanted to hit in there.
One of the biggest questions that I had was from the time you came into the league until the time that you basically retired, who was the hardest line coach that you worked for? Because I know everybody has their own idea of how you should do it, why you should do it, and when you should do it. Who was the hardest coach that you worked for?
When you say hardest, do you mean hardest on me?
Yes.
I had a bunch of line. Let me see. I had about 5 line coaches. I think Coach Joe Bugel, the famous Coach Joe Bugel, he really was hard on me in a good way. I had him in his last couple of years, RIP to Bugel, but I had the tendency sometimes earlier in my career to have wide hands, or in the run blocking, sometimes I would bring my hands from outside to inside, when really you want them in the run blocking to come under and up like a forklift. So right now, I'm doing a bunch of high school coaching and youth league coaching, and I'm trying to train my O-linemen, hands under and up like a forklift. Because if you can't bring them outside in, because that defensive lineman is already shooting them in your chest. So you really want to bring them under and up. And Joe Bugel rep that so many times, even when I wasn't supposed to have inside hands. Like on field goal protection, when you're supposed to put your hands out, I was like wanting to go inside hands.
Bugel memory, huh?
Bugel, had us doing the drills, not till our hands bled, but every single day we worked hands drills, hands. And, I think that he was hard on us, but in a good way. And when we didn't do it his way, he let us know about it. I mean, there was one Christmas Eve. This was still when Samuels was playing. We didn't do something right. He knocked a projector over. He threw a water bottle against the wall. I mean, I think he was coaching until he was 69 years old. So that guy cared enough, that everybody, was doing it the right way. Even on Christmas Eve, you think some guys may let up and do whatever, but Buggs was still coaching us as hard. And he was coaching us hard authentically, because he knew it meant something to him. Where occasionally you have other coaches that kind of treat you like you're running around with the coach's paycheck in their mouth. So they want you to do it the right way so they don't get canned. Bugel at the age of 69 just for the art of the game of football, wanted us to do it the right way.
Wow, that's awesome. The other question I have, and I appreciate you once again, Will, for stopping by to the mess hall. Who was the hardest person that you ever had to block?
You know, there's a few that come to mind. I mean, obviously, right off the bat, I want to think about maybe like Ndamukong Suh. I want to think about, I did see Aaron Donald a little bit his rookie year. There was another a little bit before their time. Chris Jenkins was up for defensive MVP in the league, you know, and Chris Jenkins was an interesting story because he was on the Panthers with me my rookie year. So I remember healthy Chris Jenkins before all of his knee surgeries. Then, you know, he had a couple knee surgeries and, you know, but he was still up for the defensive MVP award with the Jets. And then a couple of years later, you know, I'm with the Redskins, he's with the Jets, and I meet up against Chris Jenkins in the preseason game. I'm like, oh man, this is interesting. Kind of, he sort of baptized me my rookie year going in there to Carolina, and then I'm facing him again in a preseason game. But that was fun. And also another special guy was Julius Peppers. Thankfully, I didn't have to block him a whole lot, but he was another guy that my rookie year was on that Panthers team. So that Panthers team, my rookie year was loaded with Chris Jenkins, Julius Peppers, because Mike Rucker, Make Kimiotu, who Make also had a stint here in Washington. And then I ended up facing all those guys again on different teams. You know, fast forward to my 10th year in the NFL, I'm with the Chicago Bears, and we're playing against the Green Bay Packers. It's a 3rd and long, and the Green Bay lines up in a 3-man defensive front. Who's over the zero nose? Julius Peppers. I'm thinking to myself, man, this is deja vu. I've had to battle Chris Jenkins. I've had to battle Make Kimiotu, and then Julius Peppers is lined up right over top of me. It is a zero nose. You know, I have 10 years of memories of him, but, you know, he tried to hit me with a chop hump move where he tried to chop my hand and then use my momentum and club me across. And I sat on it and I blocked it. And then mid-play, he's like, okay, Monty, we're good. We're good. Almost like he was shutting it down mid-play just because his initial move didn't work. But it's fun blocking all those guys. And there's a lot more of them out there, but, you know, those are some of the names that hit my brain right off the top.
Awesome. I appreciate
That's awesome, Will. And we're joined once again by Will Montgomery, former Washington Redskins center, played in the league for 10 years. Well, I really appreciate you jumping on with us here in the mess hall. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the 2012 season. Really one of the most fun seasons we have had as fans, just memory-wise. I mean, what was it like being there in the midst of, you know, the RG3 year? What was it like blocking for a player like Robert, not knowing exactly what he was going to do in that pocket or where he was going to be? You talked about Peyton Manning knowing that at 7 yards, he was going to get rid of that ball, but Robert scrambling around and trying to make something out of nothing at times. How nerve-wracking is that from a lineman's perspective?
Well, there's pros and cons to each of those. You know, we mentioned the Peyton Manning getting rid of the ball. You know, some of those sacks Peyton did take, was taking knee dives before the sack even got there just to preserve his own health. So we're kind of scratching our heads, not too often, but occasionally we're like, well, okay. You know, but on the flip side, you know, Robert has the ability to extend a play. You know, occasionally if you get beat or something like that, he would be able to make the off schedule play. There's obviously the famous scramble in the Minnesota game when he ran for 70 yards. You know, there's a couple other plays that come to mind. You know, when the screenplay, this one is a big one for mobile quarterbacks versus non-mobile quarterbacks. So occasionally the defensive line will sniff out a screen and you can't really throw the ball away because it would be illegal man downfield. So your choices are to eat like a 10-yard sack, or if you do throw it, it's going to be illegal man downfield. And occasionally he would bail us out for dead screenplay just by scrambling and getting the 10 yards himself. No, but that, you know, like you said, that was definitely a fun season. I think we led the league also that year in yards per play. It was like 12 yards per play per average. And then another guy on that team that year was Alfred Morris. You know, he was the number 2 leading rusher in the NFL that year behind Adrian Peterson. So to get a guy like Alfred Morris, you know, whatever it is, over, I think it was like at least 1,600 yards. It was over 100 yards a game average, I believe. You know, what we were doing that season, which I think works in the NFL today, as of all of the assistant coaches who are now head coaches. If you kind of look at the Green Bay Packers to a degree, if you look at the Rams, you look at Miami Dolphins, you look at some of these coaches, what do they all have in common? They have assistants who were from that 2012 Redskins team. You kind of run the ball, you do a little play action. And I know we mentioned the offensive line earlier in this podcast. Pass protection is hard, right? I don't care who you are. If you're going backwards and they're going forwards, it's hard advantage defensive line. So sort of what that Shanahan scheme-esque helps the offensive line is we run a lot. We run, 50% or more, which is, in the NFL passing league, essentially, everybody's throwing the ball 60, 70% of the time. So if you can at least get the 50-50 or maybe slightly more than 50-50 run the pass, you're helping out the O-line. And then your deep shot plays are your play action passes, your bootlegs, your sprint passes. These are all types of passes that take the stress off the offensive line, and they allow the quarterback time to set up. So that's also gives you those big chunk plays. So then when you think about it, you only have 5 or 10, I want to call it hard plays a game. Those are your hard third and longs. When you get these Jackie Chan hands, these defensive linemen, it's like throwing your hands in the shredder when they're doing their hand chops and everything else, and the twist stunts and the exotic blitzes. That's hard. That is tough football. That's not fun. If you're going to lose sleep as an offensive lineman, it's picking up third and long stunts. So, no doubt Robert was able to help us out a little bit when we missed something. And then also, the Shanahan scheme helps out is offensive lineman friendly because they run a lot of bootlegs, a lot of play action. But that was a fun season for sure.
No, I've got a lot of great memories. I know Rally does as well, and it sounds like you do also. But Will, I want to thank you for joining us on here. We'd love to have you back on again down the road. Is there anything that you'd want to pub while you're on with us?
Nothing too much. I just want to give my wife a shout out. She does finishing up her master's and just got hired as a school counselor here at Independence High School. So and then I have my daughter is going into second grade. My son's going into kindergarten, and I'm going to be assistant flag football coach with my son's flag football team. I'm doing the Uber driver, taking my daughter to soccer and swim and gymnastics, and helping out with the Independence High School here, coaching ball and doing some things like that. So just kind of enjoying life and trying to keep that football in my blood.
That's great. Well, that's great, man.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming on.
All right, thank you.
Greatly appreciate it.